Today on the Fairy BOSSmother Show, who do you see in the mirror?
Somebody who cares about making the world a better place for everybody.
I met with Paul Lachelier, founder of an educational nonprofit in Washington, D.C., working in soft power and public diplomacy.
Learning Life, a nonprofit that is devoted to making the world a better place.
Paul is doing important work in a fractured world, but the way he talks about it is so complex. The people who should be funding his mission aren't. You're having a really hard time talking about yourself. It's always about we. It's about the organization. It's about the higher discourse of what you provide in your institution. Paul could become the face of diplomacy if he implements the strategies that we discussed today in this episode. And there's no stopping him. Right now, Paul, I'm not impressed. I don't know what you do. I don't know who your audience is. I don't know how the money's going to help. I don't know anything about the program. I don't know the solutions that you're bringing. Can I help Paul step out from behind the mission and get his work fully funded, understood, and seen?
My dad was on the last ship leaving France for the United States when the Nazi invasion happened. That experience, my father's experience, made him a lot more aware of the ways in which politics can bite your ass.
Let's meet Paul Lachelier. Now, before we meet Paul, I asked him a few questions about the work that he does and who he is behind the scenes. Let's see what he said. When I asked him, what is your business all about and who do you serve? Paul said, Learning Life is a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit developing inclusive learning communities in order to widen and deepen participation in democracy and diplomacy for our independent yet divided world. We serve youth and adults who want opportunities to learn, connect, and act for democracy or diplomacy. Okay. I know diplomacy really, really well as a trained diplomat, but I actually don't understand the mission of Paul's organization right now based on his description. And it sounds like there is going to be a little bit of a communication barrier in how we translate the work that he does to the people that he actually wants to serve. Let me see if I can help simplify this mission for Paul so that he's able to clearly articulate what he does, who he serves, and why people should back the mission he's working so hard on. When I asked him, what are your main goals for your business right now? Paul said, increase revenue, increase participation in our 3 learning communities. Right. So this is the problem when your language is too complicated. If people don't understand what you stand for, not able to serve your mission, but you're not able to capture the funding necessary to be able to lead that mission too. So I'm going to be asking Paul a lot of hard-hitting questions on what he's done so far to be visible, to articulate what it is that his organization does, and who he should really target instead of the people that he mentions in his application. I asked him, what is your biggest challenge you're currently facing in reaching those goals? Very simply, Paul said, only one time full staff, and that's me, the founder and director. Right, now I'm seeing the bigger picture now. Paul has the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he's having a really hard time lifting that above his head. I get the feeling that Paul is very much behind the scenes of his mission. He's not the visible face of this mission, and he's wearing too many hats in this organization. Let's see if I can pull out that $1 million personal brand so that he's able to attract the funding that he needs to push his nonprofit to the next level. Last but not least, I asked Paul, have you done any work on your personal brand? And Paul says, if you mean Learning Life's brand, we of course routinely use our brand colors, logo, font in our communications, occasionally create videos and photo collages to communicate our work more visually, and not often enough, due to time constraints, write and submit for publication articles that publicize our ideas. Okay, first of all, he said, if you mean Learning Life's brand, I do not mean Learning Life's brand. I mean Paul's brand, because if you are the founder and the leader of your own organization, you are a critical part of your entire organization. It sounds like Paul and I have a lot of things to discuss and dive deeper outside of the realm of diplomacy. And this is the exact foundational personal brand building I do as part of the Personal Brand Bootcamp and also the Personal Brand Starter Kit. If you haven't joined this community or picked up your starter kit, you can find the link in the bio and start building a personal brand that has real foundation, structures, and legs, that has real weight without burning you out and watering down who you are and what you stand for. Having said that, let's meet Paul Lachelier. Paul, welcome to the Fairy BOSSmother Show today. How are you doing?
I am doing very well and excited to take part in this.
Well, Paul, you've come to the Fairy BOSSmother Show, which I think is the hardest podcast you could go on. So, do you want the kiddie gloves on where I take it slightly softer on you? Or do you want hard mode and go deep and dirty?
I think deep and dirty is good.
Right, pound me. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, you said hard and dirty. I'm going to start you off soft. Paul, tell the audience, who are you and what do you do?
It's funny, you had that boxing glove, which I noticed was British, which is awesome. Had the British flag on it. I wish I had one that was like American and French because I'm French of origin and then American.
You know what? You can have one American and one French.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my name is Paul Lachelier, for those who might be wondering, like, how do you pronounce the last name? I'm the founder and the director of Learning Life. We're an educational nonprofit based in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so what is Learning Life? What exactly do you do?
We are an educational nonprofit that's a bit unusual among educational nonprofits, but in brief, we're working to widen participation in democracy and diplomacy for our fractured world.
Okay, that's a lot of big words for a lot of people. So you mentioned diplomacy, you mentioned fractured world. Let's talk about fractured world. What does that mean to you?
It means a lot of things. This could launch a long conversation, but in essence, we live in a world that is intertwined yet detached. And what I mean by that is that globally, economically, politically, we are intertwined in ways that we are sometimes aware of and many ways that we're not aware of. And sometimes it explodes in our faces, like on 9/11 or in France, November 13th, 2015. When they had their terrorist attacks. So we're intertwined in that sense. And sometimes it's actually for good, right? Like we get products from all over the world, and those products are a lot cheaper because we live in a globalized economy, for better and worse. So that's the intertwined part. But the detached part is that as human beings, we don't understand each other very well and we don't collaborate very well. And we could be doing a lot better at that. And so that's in part what we're devoted to, is trying to not just be entwined, but actually connected or attached rather than detached.
Okay. So, Paul, it sounds like your mission is huge. It's not just a national thing, it's an international mission. And you specifically mentioned it's an educational non-for-profit. So what is the educational piece? What exactly are you educating your audience on?
Yeah, so good question. I should probably give a little background about myself. So I was born in France, lived in France up until age 11. My father's French American, my mother's Spanish American. They met in New York. At some point, they married. They decided things were a little crazy in the late 1960s in the United States, a little safer, even though things were crazy in France. But they decided to move to France. And in the process, I was born there and lived there my first 11 years, moved to the US, then went on to school, more school, and more school. I've been in academia and then became a professor of sociology. So I got my undergraduate, graduates, masters, and PhDs in sociology, and then became a sociology professor. So all that to answer your question, education is kind of in my blood. That experience, that international experience, made me curious about cultural differences. And so that kind of weaves itself into our work. So the link between kind of education and then democracy and diplomacy, which is what we do, is that in order to have good democracy or diplomacy, you've got to have really good education, and an education that extends beyond school walls, because unfortunately, our schooling system, everybody's aware of this, is highly unequal. There are some people getting excellent education, others people getting piss poor education across the world. And that's creating very different life outcomes for people. And it undermines people's ability to not just develop themselves, but also to have a say in power. And if we want better democracy and better diplomacy, we have to have more people's voices represented in both. And so it requires a innovating education. And so we're developing learning communities. Our programs are essentially learning communities in development to create the kinds of caring, what we call 3C citizens, caring, capable, and connected citizens that are necessary for good democracy, good diplomacy.
All right, you know what, Paul? I'm going to run a little exercise with you because I think you're ready for this.
Okay.
I am a funder and I've got a lot of money and I'm looking to support an organization that I believe in. And knowing my background, Paul, you know that this is something that I could be interested in. Pitch to me and make it a 30-second pitch. Why should I care about your organization?
Okay, that's a good challenge. That's the first punch here. And actually, it's interesting because just last night I developed some sort of an elevator pitch, but I just a draft because I'm not good at this.
Let's see, let's see, let's see, let's see.
What I would say is that we have some long-term problems that need long-term solutions. If you're looking for a short-term solution to big problems that we have, we're not the place to come. But if you are looking for long-term solutions to big problems in democracy and diplomacy, which essentially means in self-governance and in our ability to collaborate and understand each other across the world, this has big implications for war, it has big implications for economics, et cetera, and so forth, then we need to be thinking about how do we make learning part of everybody's everyday lives as citizens and as citizen diplomats.
Paul, is this your pitch, or are you just explaining things?
Yes, well, good question, but yes, that's my pitch. That's
That's
part
your
of my pitch.
pitch.
Well, but yeah, by the way, that's not the pitch that I wrote down last night. The pitch that I wrote down last night actually
Pitch me, Paul. Come on, pitch me.
Okay, all right. So the pitch I wrote last night, because I don't have it right in front. Do you want me to read it?
I want you to tell me what's in your head,
Okay,
right?
all right.
You got 30 seconds. Right now, Paul, I'm not impressed. I don't know what you do. I don't know who your audience is. I don't know how the money's going to help. I don't know anything about the program. I don't know the solutions that you're bringing. So right now, as a funder, I'm just like, this guy has a lot of conceptual ideas. I could definitely tell you're an academic. I can't see the world, real life solutions that you're bringing. And I don't know how you're making money or any sort of like real life changes into people's lives outside of saying learning, learning. People need to learn. You need a higher discourse of learning, learning, learning. But learning equals what? What does it bring? Does it lessen anxiety? Does it shorten time? Does it bring money and economics to other people? Like, what does it do?
Okay,
So that's my punch. That's I'm going to throw this back out there just for a second. Before we do that, Paul, let me pivot to something else I'm curious about.
Yeah.
What made you decide you're now ready to be on the Fairy BOSSmother Show?
I don't know if I'm ready to be on the BOSSmother Show, but I think this exercise is good because kind of, entrepreneurs and I consider myself a civic entrepreneur need to be able to answer your good hard questions. So you want me to take another stab at it?
Do it. Come on, Paul. Come on, let's do it live. Let's go.
Okay, let me start with one of our programs because I think it'll make things a lot clearer. So we are developing a democracy learning community in the Washington, D.C. region. So we do democracy and diplomacy work. In the D.C. region, one of our projects is a youth summit on youth policymaking. We match 8th to 12th graders from across the D.C. region with younger and more experienced policy professionals. The kids meet with the professionals in person and online. So they meet online first, and then they meet in person. And the kids meet in small groups where they develop policy proposals for how to get
Sorry, Paul, time's up. You had 30 seconds and you squandered it.
Yeah, I know.
You squandered it.
I know. I said this is why I need to develop this kind of elevator pitch, and I just haven't done it yet. And I'm embarrassed to say that I founded Learning Life in 2012. We did pivot in 2015, but it's been 10 years and I don't have a damn, elevator pitch in 30 seconds that's good enough.
Right. All right. We got to fix it. So that's challenge number one. We need to fix who it is that you are and what you do. So what is the problem and what is the solution? And this is something that needs to be so easy that a fifth grader can understand it. So nothing intellectual, nothing conceptual, nothing theoretical, because Paul, if it's theory, it has to be applied in practice. But we don't care about the theory. We want to know this is work. And why is Paul the expert in this solution? Right? So Paul, let's forget about your organization for a little bit. This is your baby. You started this. You are pouring so much time, energy, sweat, blood, and tears into this. Why? Why do you care about this so much?
In short, because I think my life's mission is to try to make the world a better place. That's the short answer to it. And the best way to do that is, I believe, to try to give more people power to affect the decisions that impact their lives.
Okay, who are you talking about?
This is everybody. I mean, the populations, it's too much, I know, but once you actually dig into our programs, it's specific populations. But actually, I mean, we do a democracy festival. It's for everybody. It's for everybody who happen to live in the Washington, D.C. area. And the diplomacy work we do, like we do family diplomacy, that's for everybody across the world. I mean, you have to have some degree of cognitive maturity to participate in the dialogues because it's a lot of dialogue based kind of coming together, learning, connecting, and then ultimately participation in power. That's
All right,
the
Paul, let's bring the intellect down from here all the way down because you're talking about how this is for everybody. But
Mhm.
everybody, right now, you are divorcing yourself from everyone with the way you're speaking,
Mm.
right? You are talking about how this is for everyone, but you do need this level of intellect to be able to understand what it
Mhm.
is that we're trying to do. And the minute you do that, boom, there's a disconnect. And
Mhm.
this is the reason why a lot of NGOs specifically, they get really stuck because your discourse is so big, so wide, so complicated to understand that the general population that you're trying to help, they're like, this is not for me. This is not even like, he's not even speaking the same language as me.
Mm.
Right.
Yep.
So Paul, I'm going to go back to you. I want to understand a little bit more about you. Let's talk about the time when you were thinking about your career and you mentioned academia has been in your life for a very long time. The moment you started learning life, like let's talk 5 days before you started learning life, what was going on in your life personally?
So that was 2012. I left academia. I was a professor of sociology at Stetson University in Florida and moved to Washington, D.C. to start learning life. So went from May of 2012, finishing up in my academic career, my official academic career, to August 2012, starting learning life. And there were ideas that I had coming out of academia based upon my experience in academia that I wanted to test. And so I started doing that through learning life in 2012.
Okay, personally, what was happening with you?
Personally, and
Forget
when you
about like you starting your career or you pivoting your career. I want to know, as a man, Paul, what was happening in your life at that time? Where were
Mhm.
you? What was happening around you? Not economically or politically, in Paul's personal life.
So I mentioned that I was a professor. I should, I guess, on a personal note, never at the time was not married and had no kids.
Mm.
And so I could move easily. I think, emotionally and kind of cognitively, I think what I can tell you is both the good and the bad of my personality and of being a social entrepreneur is that you're an eternal optimist, and I'm not necessarily the best planner. And so I went into this like not with a particularly, I had some vague ideas, but not with a detailed plan. And to be honest, like, I mean, I'm still developing that stuff. It's still, we have detailed plans,
Mm.
but stuff is still being worked out. 10 years later. No, it's more than 10 years later.
Mm.
Sorry, 2012. But I mean, again, the pivot happened in 2015. So it's been,
Well, it is 10 years now. Yeah,
it
yeah,
is 10
yeah.
years, yeah,
Mm.
since we've started what we're doing now. So
Yeah. All right, Paul. It sounds like you're having a really hard time talking about yourself. It's always about we. It's about the organization. It's about the higher discourse of what you provide in your institution. And you're finding it really hard to talk about myself as Paul, me,
mhm.
without that professor hat, without the organization. Now, if you were to remove your academic history and if we were to remove your nonprofit, what are we left behind with?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you. In the last couple of years, Learning Life has had to do some strategizing, and it was prompted by one of our board members. And as part of that strategizing, and she was the VP of an organization called the Institute for International Education, and she had me write I forget what it's called now, but it's like a personal statement, or it's as to why, like why did you start Learning Life? And there's a term for it. And that starts, I think I start that statement with my dad. My dad was on the last ship leaving France for the United States when the Nazi invasion of France happened. And he was not a citizen of the United States when he came to the US. And so he was at risk of not being allowed into the United States, but for the war. His sister and his brother had both been born in the US because, like him, like me, his mom was American, his father's French. And the same thing for me. My father's French, my mother's American. So not only did they survive, they were stopped by a U-boat on the way, a German U-boat. So the U-boat could have sunk them and sunk something like 33,000 ships over the long span of the Battle of the Atlantic between the United States, between the Allies and the Axis powers in World War II.
Mm.
So that experience, my father's experience, made him a lot more aware of the ways in which politics can bite your ass, can come back and bite your ass. And it
Yeah.
literally, could have ended his life and his family's life because he came across, his father was at Dunkirk and fought on the French, then the American side. He had fought in World War One, fought in World War Two, and his family, his three kids and his wife fled to the United States on that last ship. They could have been sunk. He could have been not allowed into the United States.
Yeah.
Big consequences of politics. That there are lots of kind of like family stories that are told in this. It's called an origin story. So the
Yeah.
origin story for learning life. So that history, that family history made my father forever kind of interested in what's going on in the world. And he said, beware. He taught me the word demagogue as a young kid. And he said, beware anybody who wraps themselves in their country's flag. He said this long before Trump came on the scene. And I'm being slightly political here, but the point is there are big consequences to politics, and our ability to pay attention and participate is crucial because of things like this, right? And we could go on with historical examples, but
Right,
that's a
right.
personal family example.
Right. So forget about the history. What you shared right now, Paul, is incredibly pivotal to everything that you do going forward. That origin story, there's a real deep meaning to why the work that you're doing is so important to you. It's deep in your history. This could have been a life and death consequence. You probably would have never been born if it wasn't for the last boat, right? So this has a deep family root within everything that you shared. Your origin story, Paul, is one of your biggest mirrors to reflect back into the world. So I want us to think about something in a slightly different fashion. All right, so if you can put your hands out. So this is a mirror. Right now, what you're doing is you're talking at your audience right now, not knowing who your audience is. And this is why you're having such a hard time articulating what learning life does, why it exists, who it benefits, and why it should continue to exist. Now, if we were to turn that mirror back to you, let's try this. Right now, I want you to look in the mirror. So your hand is your mirror. Who do you see in the mirror?
Somebody who cares about making the world a better place for everybody.
Who's that somebody right now?
A civic entrepreneur.
Look in the mirror closely. This is a mirror. Whose face is being reflected back into this mirror?
His face is being...
Don't overthink it, Paul. This is a literal mirror in your hand. Whose face are you seeing in that mirror?
Paul Lachelier's face.
Yes, yes. So think about this. You're looking at Paul's face right now. This is the little boy who probably wouldn't have ever existed if it wasn't for that last boat. Because of the consequences that your family went through, you wouldn't have survived. You would not have been born. And there's a lot of political repercussions completely tied to your family. This, Paul, is your audience. This is people like you whose lives are completely either tarnished or tied by political repercussions. So we're thinking expats. That's a really good one. There's millions of expats who come into America every single day. There's travelers, let's say American travelers, because you are based in America. We've got American travelers going outside of their countries, and immediately they are stereotyped by what other people say about their country. So they're not even given a chance to represent themselves as an individual, right? Then you have individuals who have mixed nationalities. And as a result of mixed nationalities, there's mixed identity issues and mixed loyalty on, I don't know where I belong. I don't know if I'm American or French or this or that. Those are your three audiences right there. Do you think that's an accurate reflection?
Expats and people of mixed nationality. And then I missed the third, I gather.
Right. Americans going abroad is the last one.
Yeah.
And I'm saying Americans specifically based on your location. Now, if you were living in France, I would have said French citizens going abroad, right? But I want to be very geographically specific here because you have a lot of power right now being in DC, right? The government and other embassies are right on your doorstep, right? A lot of people who want to be in the same world as you are right there studying and wanting to become government officials. And then the media's eyes are looking at everything DC is doing. So that is the foundation of your audience. It's someone like you, Paul. It's someone who has gone through something similar, but your story is your story. Your story makes you really unique. So now that we've established that, we have a foundation to work from. Okay. Next is, right, so this was my origin. Now, imagine if all of these things had happened. Imagine if my parents didn't make it onto that boat. Imagine if that boat didn't even exist, right? Imagine if my parents came to France, but they weren't allowed to come into that country. Imagine if I couldn't come back to America because you are a French citizen. Like there's a lot of what ifs. These are the problems that a lot of ordinary people are facing right now. It's all of the what ifs. So if I was to give you an exercise, it would be, right, as Paul Lachelier, not as any other human on earth, you know yourself better than anyone, Paul. Write down all of the what ifs, all of the hypothetical situations that could have been, and then the implications that would have had on your life specifically. And then from that exercise, you can actually extrapolate, holy crap, this could have been my reality. But what was the thing that saved me from these disastrous consequences? That, Paul, is the solution. That is the solution that you and your organization brings to the world.
Yeah. Okay. It's going from what would have happened if I'd not been born, because my father would have been turned back to France, to Nazi occupied France.
There's a lot of what ifs. I think the examples that I gave you are just little examples. What if what if your parents came to France and they got denied? What if they moved back to America or any other country and they got denied with you on tow? Like, what could have happened? Because these are real consequences. And these are things that people are living with on a daily basis because of political repercussions, right? So this is something that I think you can go away and extrapolate and put down on paper, because the answers that you provide to yourself, Paul, are solutions that your organizations can potentially provide to individuals like you.
Yep.
So when I say all of this, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's tying my personal story, or my family's personal story, much more to the solutions. I get doing that. I get those audiences that you're pointing out. Part of the challenge is that let me throw a punch at you here.
Let's go.
For a moment, is that those audiences that you identified, immigrants/expats, people with mixed nationalities, Americans going abroad, right? Not all of them, especially the mixed nationality people, are privileged, but the first two audiences, or the other two audiences, immigrants and expats, Americans going abroad, a lot of them are. Not all of them, right? There are refugees, there are immigrants who are, so tons of people. But there's also, and this is really significant for the United States, and this actually, by the way, also significant for people across the world who have not traveled, don't have the privilege of, mixed nationality, et cetera, and so forth. And those people we need to reach all the more in this authoritarian era, right? So they have to be part of our audience. And so, yes, there's an organic audience for whom this resonates more. But if we're serious about solving these problems, we have to involve those people who have not traveled abroad in the conversation, in learning, and in the participation in power, right? So part of what we're trying to do is get people who've not traveled at all outside their country to talk with people who have traveled, who've faced all kinds of problems, the what ifs and so on that we just discussed. Get them to talk to each other and understand each other, and then ultimately link these people to power so that their voices are heard.
Right. So here's a problem with what you suggested. Will they care enough to listen? Because you can't push a rock if it doesn't want to be moved. And you're going to be expending a lot of energy pushing a boulder when there's a moving rock right next to you. So do you want to go for something really, really hard and something that's immovable, or do you want to work with something that's already got a little bit of momentum, right? Especially when you're growing an organization and a movement, you've got to start with the voices who want to be heard, who are already being impacted, who are self-aware enough that this is happening to them, not the silent majority who are just doing this and they just want to stay in their own bubble. So bursting their bubble is going to cause more problems. And that's not how you get funding for your organization.
Yep. I hear you for the most part, right? Because I think you're right that the constituencies, you have to appeal to people for whom this stuff is going to resonate naturally from their lived experience. But there are such things as schools, right? And schools open people's eyes. And, part of our plan is to develop relationships with schools across the world, even schools where the kids, have never stepped outside their country, don't really know people who are different from them. And it can be that learning about that stuff can be transformative for them. But you're right that, like, if I approached a family on their own, they're not going to be interested, probably.
Yeah, because it's like, what is it for me? Why should I care? There's a million other things. taxing on my time right now, and you're just interrupting with nothing, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
you have to come in with enough of a reason to be disruptive for them. And then you mentioned school. There's millions of schools that you can be talking to. That's a lot of time to convince one school at a time. And also, when you do go to schools, is it a full-on program or is it a one-off? I'm going to talk to you children about citizen diplomacy and blah, 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 and then you peace out again. So how much of an impact does that have to have with kids? So there's a lot of things to think about, because a lot of it is short-term solutions. It's a Band-Aid solution.
Totally agree with you.
Right.
Yeah, I
So
believe
again,
me.
we got to think micro before you can think macro. So again,
Yeah.
your audience, Paul, is like, is it the grown-ups? Is it the kids? You kind of have to choose. If you think, all right, let's start off with the kids first and then work our way up, that's probably easier to do. Do you want to start off at like the kindergarteners, but start with kindergarteners all over the country and then move on to the next stage? Or do you want to just hit all the different schools, and whatever school's interested, that's the age group I'm going to be targeting? Because that way you're actually watering your messaging down.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right that what we're learning thus far, and it's specifically because we did this youth summit on youth policy making that I mentioned to you, is that when you can harness the interests of parents in their kids' outcomes, right? Parents are you're a new mom, I gather. Parents are really powerfully interested in their kids and making sure that their kids do well. They may not be interested necessarily in the wider world and whether the wider world their kids inherit. Like, that's too big a problem for them. They just want to get their kid to make it through life. But because of big problems like climate change, et cetera, and so forth, parents are beginning to recognize, some at least, right, that you can't really you can't just focus on your kid if you want your kid to have a life, right, a long term that's not racked with war and climate change and all these other things. So I think you're right that we probably, if we had to choose between adults and kids, we would choose kids. We would choose kids in part because it can leverage the parents, and because we got a family diplomacy initiative, right? Internationally, that's part of what we do. Citizen Diplomacy International is not just for kids, it's for adults and so on. But as for, it's for diplomats and others interested and so on. But the democracy work we do locally, it's this youth summit, it's a democracy festival, the dinners, not necessarily involving kids, but we want the kids to be involved because they're the future of democracy and diplomacy, right? And in the DC area, and I'm glad you mentioned that because, it is a huge privilege to live in the DC area, right? It is not just a center of diplomacy, it's a center of politics. We happen to be one of the most powerful nations on earth, for better and for worse. And so there's enormous opportunity just here. And that's in part why we're focused here. But we do simultaneously this international work strictly online. So I'm going to stop blabbing because I can blab on forever.
No. So just imagine you had one program. That one program you want to make highly successful. If there's one thing that you are really good at, it'll be this one thing. This one thing is something that you replicate everywhere. And then what you end up having is like a mini nucleus of like activity happening, but you're focusing on the same age group, you're focusing on the same messaging, you're basically scaling your organization now for this one little thing that you're sharing. And if you want to have a ripple effect from the kids to the grown-ups, then there needs to be something that they can bring to their parents and saying, hey, look what this cool thing I did. I'm going to make sure that everyone in this household is doing the same thing now because they've been enrolled into caring about this issue. And I feel like that's where I feel like you have the biggest impact, Paul.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that we have 3 different programs, but the one that to me is long-term most exciting and most kind of game-changing is the Family Diplomacy Initiative, because it's activating the family as, I'm being abstract here, but as a civic agent in the world, right? Families right now, everybody thinks protect family, it's vulnerable and so on, which is true. But why don't families, because they're so important to so many people across the world, across all these lines of difference, family, we know this from the World Values Survey, families are by far more than friends, more than politics, more than religion. People value their families. And yet, when it comes to decision making on issues that impact families are not at the decision making table the way that businesses and labor unions are. Why is that? Families should be at the decision making table, and that's what long term we're trying to do is to identify volunteer family diplomats across the world. And they are going to, more often than not, they're going to be young people that are trying to just get good experiences, right? Kids trying to get through college or high school, and they want to develop their resumes. And we're giving them an opportunity to participate in international citizen diplomacy, but through the family, through the prism of the family. And as part of it, ideally, they have to involve other members of their families. So it can be a sister or brother, it can be a parent, it can be a grandparent, whatever. But the best family diplomacy is not one person advocating. It's
Yeah.
like a
It's the
kid
nucleus. Yeah.
exactly. It's a
Yeah.
kid and a mom, or it's a grandparents and grandchildren. That visually, and this is in part what we're trying to recognize is that for marketing purposes, because we have to think about marketing, it's a hell of a lot better when you have a family speaking to the ways in which they've been impacted by climate change or poverty or war than just one person talking.
Right.
And it
But
has
you need
much
an
more power.
advocate. You need an ambassador to talk
Mhm.
about this one issue, and that ambassador influences everyone else in that family. We're going
Mhm.
to turn
Yeah.
that child into the ambassador to be able to
Yes.
confidently bring it up, raise the point. They could have 7, 8 family in the, people in the family. Can you imagine if all of them are like, yes, 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 yes? One person did the job of like
Yes.
7 other people, right?
Yeah, and this is right. And I think your point that young people, or that we have to decide between young people and adults, and that I think the answer is young people, is in part because if a parent comes to their family and says, "Hey, we've got this exciting thing called family diplomacy and I want you to participate in it." The kids might gloss over and go, "Oh, this is another, do good thing that my parents want to do. And I just want to play
Yeah,
video games."
right.
But there are kids out there who care deeply about the wider world, and they are part of, some of them are bicultural, or they've traveled abroad, et cetera, and so forth. And you're right, they are our champions.
Right.
So,
And also, make believe is really important, right? They're not in this situation right now. You don't want them to give them anxiety and saying, this could be you, because that's scary. We don't want to make the world a scary place. So, what you can then do is let's do some role playing. You are a diplomat and you are now a diplomat. Let them understand what it means to be a diplomat, because a lot of kids know police officers, firefighters, nurses, all of the 911 services. They don't know, even an adult, they don't know what a diplomat is or what an ambassador does. Recruit every single child in that classroom. Give them something, give them a badge, a sticker, something they could take home. Say, today I was a diplomat. And the parents will be, what the hell is a diplomat? And then the kids say, well, as a diplomat, I did boom, 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 boom. And the one thing I talked about was this one issue. I think we need to care about this a little bit more, right? And this is how you turn kids' minds, because you're putting them in a situation, in a make-believe situation, where they have a lot of control, they have a lot of power. No one can say no to them, because these are the 3 things that kids behaviorally really want. They want control, power, and a say, just like every other human on Earth. Give them that power, but give them the power for good as a diplomat. And I feel like this is where learning life starts to have a voice. It starts to have an impact. And your name, Learning Life, actually has like real meaning behind it now. I know what it means now. I know what Learning Life means right now. And I know who it serves. I know why you are doing this. And I know how you can make this into a small organization to like a nucleus that can spread across the whole of the state and then internationally. That's where I see the work that you do, Paul, and Learning Life.
Good stuff.
Right. So reflecting back to you, how does that now make you feel? That's the $1 million version of you and your organization.
Yeah, I think what I'm taking away so far is focus on these audiences, immigrants, mixed nationality people, Americans who've traveled abroad or going abroad, and give them some imagination. And then focus on kids above all, because they have this kind of emotional leverage over parents, for good rather than for bad. It gives the kids a leadership role for good, and then get the kids, and this is new, and I have to actually, I'm interested in this, is getting the kids to imagine what it means is in the long term, not to be a professional diplomat, because that's a really small group of people
Right.
who lead very privileged lives, and only a few people are going to end up with those careers, but a much, much broader population of people who could be family diplomats.
Right.
And yeah, and getting them to imagine what that means, I think, and kind of creating a pathways would be helpful. Yeah, and I'm curious to learn more about what you think about how do we make them imagine that
Yeah, well, I can
in
see
ways
that.
that are exciting.
Yeah, I can see the cogs turning. I can see that from the moment that we started to have a conversation, I can see that there's a little bit more of a spark to where you want to go. So, Paul, we are wrapping up very quickly on this episode of the Fairy Boss Mother Show. What is the one thing that you're going to implement based on our conversation today?
It is that last thing that I mentioned. It's also, I actually three things. It's those three things, but I do think that we're a small organization, me working full time. We have a team of interns and then a lot of volunteers, but I'm going to task our interns with kind of identifying organizations that work with these different constituencies. So expats, mixed nationality people, Americans going abroad. That's one thing. Two is doing this work of trying to imagine how do we create some sort of imagination for what being a family diplomat is to kids that's going to be exciting to them, that they want to. So far it hasn't been a difficult sell. The question is whether or not we can get them to stick around. Your point earlier was super important about like long-term change versus just short-term. There are a huge number of nonprofits out there that are just creating kind of, here's a program, you go through it and then you're done.
That's it.
That's not what we do. We create a program that's connected to contributing to long-term change. And so getting them excited to be contributing to a community long-term that's making social change long-term. So
yeah. Okay, that was a lot. So there's clearly a lot of work that you're going to be doing after our call. And what is the biggest realization you had talking to me today?
I think that last part about imagination. I think what's interesting to me about the way in which you operate is in part that you're trying to get people to imagine stuff, and using imagination to kind of excite commitment or ignite commitment is, I think, an important kind of takeaway.
Yeah. All right, Paul, I'm going to give you one last chance. You've got 30 seconds on the clock. Right, let's see how much you've learned. I want you to give me your best shot, okay? Paul, I'm going to grade you A to F because you are in academia. Right, let's get your hands away from your face and let's give me your best confidence pose right now. Show me your best confidence pose.
This is my best confidence pose.
You could do a bit better, shoulders back,
okay. Right. Yeah, let me coif my hair or something.
Paul, who are you? And what do you do?
I am the son of immigrants, and I am the founder and director of Learning Life, a nonprofit that is devoted to making the world a better place for immigrants and others who've experienced political problems.
Okay.
That's not great.
Oh, I'm going to give you a D grade on that.
Yeah, I know that's a D. It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, the whole pitch thing totally it's got to be worked out. Elevated.
It's going to be a boom, boom, boom,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're going to punch them in the face because that shows, number one, you're really confident in your mission. Number two, you know exactly who you're helping, why you're helping them, and what the outcome is, problem and solution. And number three, I want to be like foaming at the mouth going, holy crap, this guy has something that I want to put money behind. You want people to financially back you, especially as a nonprofit, right? You want people to say, I believe in Paul so much. Boom, here's 10K. Boom, here's another 10K. And money's just coming at you because of the way you are presenting yourself. So your personal brand, Paul, needs to be completely nailed down. And right now it's like Jello.
Yeah, I know. In 30 seconds, it's like Jello.
Yeah, it's like jelly and it's like falling through my hands. And I'm just like, I don't see Paul. He's gone. He's like all over my fingers and I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah. Hard lesson taken.
Yeah. All right. What's this hard mode for you, Paul?
Is hard mode, but I think it's exactly as I expected. You were right. Like you need to have a 30-second pitch. I should have had a 30-second pitch a long time ago. I've developed these things and I haven't actually practiced it, honed it, et cetera, and so forth. And our strategy group hasn't done that yet. So yeah.
Well, there's your homework. Any last words to the Fairy Boss Mother today?
You rock.
Well, hopefully this wasn't too much of a punching session for you, but I feel like you needed it. And I'm glad that you came on the Fairy Boss Mother Show. Paul, how can people support the work that you're doing?
That's sweet of you to ask. They can go to learninglife.info and check the About page to learn more about us. And at the very least, sign up to learn more about what we're doing. On the right side, there's a way to sign up for more information.
Paul, it was such a pleasure having you on the Fairy BOSSmother Show. And I can't wait to see what you do with the information that we shared today on this call.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Fairy BOSSmother Show and feel ready to build your $1 million personal brand, download the Personal Brand Starter Kit for just $29 and learn the exact system I use to turn small business owners into $1 million personal brands. Go to brandlikeabosskit.com or snap the QR code on this video. See you soon.